This video is dedicated to Grant Imahara and the creativity that he inspired. Hey everyone, this is Gray Merchant of Magic. I'm really proud of my last video, but since it was my longest, heaviest, most research-intensive one yet, I thought I'd go for a simpler topic this time around, mainly debunking every single common misconception and urban legend that exists in Magic. Or at least the ones that myself and helpful people on the internet could think of, because there certainly are a whole lot of them out there. Don't believe me? Well, what if I told you that I had the math to back me up? In 1879, the phrase, "there's a sucker born every minute," was first known to have been said. In that year, the population was around 1.325 billion. The population has since grown to 5.8 times that number. If the sucker rate is now the same, that means that there is now a sucker born every 10 seconds or so, or about 8,640 new suckers a day. Since an estimated 20 million people, or 0.0025 of the global population, play Magic, that means that 22 of those newborn suckers are Magic players. Since Magic is 27 years old, that means there are about 200,000 Magic playing suckers out there. Probably. I do go to a liberal arts school. But think of how many Magic-related hoaxes, myths, and misconceptions that probably means are out there. There are definitely at least 32-ish, which is conveniently the number that I'm going to discuss today. Specifically, I'm going to be looking at mistakes that I've witnessed people frequently make about Magic's story and/or game or design history. What I'm not going to discuss is rules misunderstandings, because if you want to learn more about those, there's a new thread on it on the Magic subreddit every other week. Hopefully the topic's meaning will become more clear as I go through the video. Also, I certainly don't want to imply that I'm more knowledgeable or less prone to mistakes than any of you. I held a fair number of these misconceptions up until I did the research for this video. These myths have a variety of origins, from an individual intentionally spreading lies to wizards simply failing to communicate something clearly. Anyway, I've organized the list in a roughly chronological order, with 21 out of Magic's 27 years of history represented, so we can get a good understanding of the evolving landscape of the game, or how a myriad of magical mistakes may manifest minutely. 1993, the Blue Streak. For our first urban legend, we're going all the way back to Magic origins. Since Alpha, all standard Magic cards have had an identical back. There's enough to talk about here for a full video, but for now I'll stick to an element that people lied to me about. Mainly, this little squiggle right here. Now, I was always told that this was an accidental pin mark, but it turns out that no one thought to ask someone actually in the know, because the story is complete BS. The mark was a deliberate artistic choice, and in retrospect it does seem odd that if it was unintentional, no one noticed. I know that art and printing quality control were basically non-existent back then, but messing up how every single card ever looks would be next level. 1993, Color Goodness. Like, morally, man. Also in 1993, we got the origin of Magic's color pie. Mechanically, the color pie serves to divide different abilities between the 5 colors. Creatively, each color also has unique ideals and outlooks on life. Since its inception, there's been a tendency to divide the colors into an oversimplified good/bad binary. White and green are good, black and red are bad, blue is in the middle. Okay, I guess it's more of a trinary, but you get the point. Many people ignore the nuance of the color pie. Characters of any color can be heroes, villains, or regular people. White can be prideful, dogmatic, and oppressive. Black can fight for personal liberties or to protect their loved ones. Green can be merciless and overly reliant on tradition. Red can put its passion and love of freedom towards beneficial change. Blue can apply its research to do great good or great harm. Placing colors into categories of always good or always evil not only indicates a misunderstanding of the color pie, it results in boring, uncreative Magic characters and cards. 1994, Throat Wolf. Next, we have another urban legend, that of the Throat Wolf, the card that never was, until it was several times. To clarify, spoiler season wasn't always as convenient to players as it is now. These days, all we have to do is check our computers and we have access to every upcoming and pre-existing card ever. It has never been easier to immortalize our collective inability to properly judge the power level of a card. But in the olden days, it was different. Apparently. I wasn't born yet, but that's besides the point. It was a wild west out there. It was difficult to get a complete list of upcoming or even pre-existing cards. Enter a Usenet user named Jesse. Jesse referenced a non-existent card known as Throat Wolf in a trade discussion. And from there, a legend was born. References to Throat Wolf started popping up all over various nets, with many users believing that it was a real card. The posts would each have a different description of the card, but most included a reference to some form of firstest strike. As technology advanced and fully detailed card lists became the norm, the hoax died down, but still clearly has a special place in the hearts of the design team. Multiple real cards have referenced Throat Wolf, including as recently as 2019. Unknown, Richard Garfield, the original MTG Finance Master. Now, this urban legend doesn't have a specific date attached to it, with the 7-year-old post I found referring to it, claiming that was an old rumor even back then. To be honest, I don't even know if it's real. We may have reached the inception level hoaxes about hoaxes portion of this video, but I needed to share this one with the world due to how idiotic it is. According to the post, Magic users used to allege that the game's creator, Richard Garfield, would buy up copies of Black Lotus and destroy them in order to increase the value of his own collection. Now, I haven't taken an economics class since sophomore year of high school, but to me, it seems like the smart thing to do when you buy something for a lot of money is to keep that thing. What I find most interesting about the post, though, is that bit at the end. There are always some players who will believe anything that fits the evil and greedy stereotype. I completely agree with where they're coming from. There's always a boogeyman in Magic, and in a lot of other nerdy franchises too. Some individual or entity who is ruining everything, and who the true fans need to rescue the franchise from. But what surprises me the most is that Richard Garfield was apparently considered that figure by some players at some point. Nowadays, Garfield is seen as the big good of Magic. Similarly to someone like George Lucas, it seems that some fans like creators best when they are actively creating. In 1996, Mark Rosewater does everything. Speaking of Magic's boogeymen, people blame Mark Rosewater for so much stuff that isn't his jurisdiction. He's head designer. That means that he is mostly or wholly not responsible for pricing, story, art, supplementary sets, printing, marketing, shipping, bans, professional play, digital Magic, or Commander. Additionally, sitting power level is more the purview of Magic's development team than its design team. While Rosewater of course has a large hand in Magic, he is not the king of the game. Magic is a complex creature and Wizards is a large company. No one person is responsible for all of its components. 1997. Creature Construct Creation Confusion. In 1997, Magic's story was finally tightened. Prior to the publication of the Weatherlight Saga, the canon was much more anything goes. That period of Magic storyline is known as the pre-revisionist era. I bring it up because with the transition from that era to the modern one, the description of how Planeswalkers summoned creatures was completely retconned. Prior to 1997, Planeswalkers literally kidnapped creatures from across the multiverse to fight and die in their battles. Despite that being retconned, many players believe that is still the case. This is understandable, as it's very easy to misinterpret the cards as supporting that version. However, the modern story generally states that Planeswalkers merely recreate mindless approximations of creatures that they have encountered. This is much better in my opinion, because the prior version was dark in its implications. You know the old joke that Pokemon is just fantasy dogfighting? Well, the pre-revisionist version of Magic was like that, but significantly worse. You see, you, the player, are canonically a Planeswalker. That means that originally, you are summoning countless sentient people to die for your petty entertainment. It certainly makes those old recess games of Magic a little more questionable. 1998. These characters were not meant for walking. Because most of Magic's main characters are Planeswalkers, people sometimes assume that every main character is a Planeswalker. In actuality, a lot of prominent Magic characters were never Planeswalkers, especially back in the day. Additionally, a Planeswalker is a specific type of entity. It is possible to gain enough power to travel between planes without being a Planeswalker. Additionally, prior to an in-universe event known as the Mending, the boundaries between planes were a lot less uncrossable. The MTG Wiki has a whole list of individuals falsely assumed to be Planeswalkers, but I'll briefly cover the three that I see people get mistaken on the most. Firstly, Mishra, brother of Urza. Perhaps because of the two sets of Planeswalking siblings that we know of, people falsely assume that if one sibling is a walker, all of them are guaranteed to be. In fact, the dragons and the Kinriths are the exception, and both sets of twins have non-walker siblings. Mishra was never a Planeswalker and only managed to travel to Phyrexia utilizing a portal. Next, Yawgmoth and Marit Lage traveled between planes through sheer magical power, not because they were Planeswalkers who are intrinsically capable of doing so. And on a similar note, Marit Lage was not an Eldrazi, as she is a non-colorless mage with a physical body, as opposed to the colorless, classless, projected forms of the Eldrazi Titans. 1998. Urza's the bad guy.
Duh.
Now, if you've seen most of my other videos, you know that I'm no fan of Urza as a person. Unfortunately, many players seem unaware of his shortcomings and assume that him serving as protagonist and face of the game for some time means that he's meant to be viewed as a good man. I didn't want to repeat my past arguments why this is not the case, so instead I wrote a poem. Urza originated back in 1998. In biometrics, he wasn't so great. He burned Dominaria fighting his brother. He abandoned his wife, who was a mother. He ignored his sons, both silver and flesh. Because of him, Sarah's realm met its death. students he killed couldn't be saved. The people he bred were straight up enslaved. When it came to Phyrexia, he was a stan. Yep, he really was just the suckiest man. A lot of characters from that era were, at best, anti-heroes, despite how many modern players and even later cards depict them. For example, Freyalise was xenophobic, got a lot of innocents killed, cultivated a fanatic religion around herself. Also, she would float just above the ground instead of standing, which is unnecessarily extra. Similarly to Freyalise, WINGRACE held a violent hatred for anyone with any connection to artifacts, and tried to brainwash and enslave Venser. 1998, CROVAX WINGRACE. Speaking of WINGRACE, there is a widespread misconception that the character of CROVAX had some sort of connection with him, and that they even shared a last name. There is in fact absolutely no evidence for this. 1998, the Chaos ORB-AN legend. Next, we have another urban legend. Back in Magic's earliest days, there existed dexterity cards that required physical skill to utilize. One of them was Chaos Orb. When dropped, it would destroy all non-token permanents that it landed on. According to the legend, in a very early tournament, a player ripped up their copy of Chaos Orb into confetti and sprinkled them over their opponent's entire board, destroying everything. Some versions of the story also add that the Chaos Orb player was then disqualified for running a deck with only 59 cards. The silver-bordered card Chaos Confetti would go on to reference this tale. 1999. Hasbro? Looking back to Magic's Boogeymen, people often act like Hasbro purchasing Wizards of the Coast is a recent event. This is not the case. Wizards has been a division of Hasbro since 1999, meaning that Magic has spent more time under Hasbro than not. Additionally, saying that Hasbro has been exclusively bad for Magic is an oversimplification. Ravnica, Innistrad, Dominaria, and any number of other highly popular sets came out in this period. While there have been decisions that were likely due to higher up pressure that I disagree with, it's undeniable that a lot of good stuff has happened during this long period too. 2000. KARN Pacifism. Next, we have another story misconception. Whenever KARN makes a new appearance and is shown fighting, we'll see comments that Wizards is betraying his character and forgetting his oath of pacifism. In actuality, KARN explicitly renounced that oath all the way back in 2000. Again, KARN has spent a much greater percentage of his history free from the oath than under it. 2002. AKROMA is technically a catgirl. When most players picture the character of AKROMA, they probably picture a fairly standard, if a bit shiny, angelic figure. This is completely fair, as that's a depiction of her that every card shows. However, she actually spent the majority of her life as an angel, jaguar, centauric hybrid, and was even said to gain cat-like traits from this. I'm still waiting for Wizards to errata all of her cards to be the cat creature type. 2003. Reports of my death are greatly exaggerated. Bolas. Tetsuro Umezawa is famous for one thing, killing Bolas. Do you know what that was? Stolen Valor, because Bolas never actually died. Okay, maybe Stolen Valor is a little strong, but it's true that despite player beliefs, Umezawa did not kill Bolas. Bolas' physical body was destroyed, but his essence lived on, Voldemort style, and he would eventually return to physical existence. Similarly, Ajani destroyed an effigy of Bolas, not the true dragon. 2004. Kamigawa wasn't popular. Whenever the Kamigawa discourse starts up again, a lot of bold claims are made about how a certain aspect of the Kamigawa block was actually beloved. The thing is, these claims are all contradictory. People will say that the gameplay was bad, but that the flavor was popular, or that the flavor was weird, but the limited was great, or that the limited was bad, but had a great effect on constructed, or that it was overall underpowered compared to other sets, but it was great within the block. The truth is, both the flavor and the mechanical sides of the block were severely unpopular at the time and continue to score low. There isn't some grand conspiracy to deny a return to Kamigawa to its endless ranks of fans. Despite what a vocal minority would tell you, Kamigawa just isn't that liked. At the end of the day, Wizards is a business, and if returning to Kamigawa made sense from a demand standpoint, they likely would have done it already. 2005. DIMIR Secrets. It's true that for most of Ravnica's existence, the DIMIR were the secret 10th guild. However, for most of the time that we've known the plane, its existence has in fact been known to the public. While the average person thinks they're just the guild of nerdy scribes and librarians, they have been fully aware of the organization's existence since our very first visit to Ravnica back in 2005. And given that the DIMIR symbol is now all over Ravnica, it'd be a bit hard for them to still keep their existence secret. 2005. Ravnica can't be that big, right? Speaking of Ravnica, the fact that the plane and the plane's biggest city share a name has led to the misconception that the plane is only that city. Maybe this confusion would stop happening if you stopped reusing location names, Wizards. But anyway, the plane of Ravnica is in fact a globe with poles and a circumference of at least 600 miles, and likely many more. 2006. VRZA'S, and Mel are psychographics. In 2002, Mark Rosewater wrote of 3 psychographic profiles, referred to as Johnny, Timmy, and Spike, respectively, at the time. The categories each describe a different reason why players enjoy the game. Later on, a different profile system was devised, that of the aesthetic. This one explores what players find beautiful in the game and has 2 categories, VRZA'S and Mel. Originally, these were considered additional categories within the psychographic profiles section, but it was eventually decided to have them be their own spectrum. Many players missed this update and still consider the 5 categories to be mutually exclusive. 2006, COLDSNAP-BACK to reality. 2006 saw the release of COLDSNAP, marketed as the legendary Lost 3rd set of the 95-96 Ice Age block. According to the set's announcement, an employee found a dusty file with a completed set of card designs at the bottom of an old filing cabinet. This was in fact just a made-up scenario to build excitement, as can be figured out by looking at the set's official credits. However, many players believe the marketing to this day. 2008, gentlemen prefer blonde Elspeth. Not really, they just think that she is one. Many players falsely assume that Elspeth has blonde hair. I believe that there are 2 reasons for this. One is that early on, she was often depicted with a covered head. In her first ever Planeswalker card, she also has a head wrap on that could easily be mistaken for light-colored hair from a distance. Another possibility is that because Elspeth is a pretty unambiguously good character, the stereotype of blonde hair symbolizing purity has come into play. If so, that'd be a pretty clear example of internal bias affecting how Magic players view the story. 2008, comparatively new, but not the newest, Phyrexia. Speaking of Elspeth, let's talk about her plane of origin. She was born on a currently unnamed Phyrexian-controlled plane that was neither the original Phyrexia nor the former Mirrodin. Contrary to popular belief, New Phyrexia is not the only, well, new Phyrexia. There are an unknown number of Phyrexian-controlled planes in the multiverse. There's also be either KARN unknowingly spreading glistening oil, or holdovers from the days when planar travel was more common. 2009, characteristic and iconic races. This one is a misunderstanding of Wizards of the Coast terminology. Characteristic and iconic races are respective lists of specific creature types for each color. Players often either use them interchangeably or apply the wrong creature types to them. The set, official characteristic, and iconic races are shown here. Also, while it is possible that individual entries may change, as has happened in the past, many player suggestions for improvement betray a misunderstanding of the concept. A characteristic race has to be an easily identifiable creature type that could show up on many different worlds. So a creature type like Core doesn't work because they're unique to Magic and don't fit on many planes. On the other hand, an iconic race has to be an exciting creature type that mostly shows up at higher rarities. This means that a creature type like Dinosaur or Beast that shows up across the board wouldn't be ideal. 2010, You Aren't Eldrazi, The Real Me. Look, I'm sorry, I had to come up with a lot of these titles. The Eldrazi are otherworldly, Lovecraftian entities, so some of their attributes are naturally easy to misunderstand. There are a lot of elements of the Eldrazi that mess fans up, so I'm going to go through them one by one. Firstly, we have actually only ever seen the 3 Eldrazi Titans. All the other Eldrazi that we see are merely extensions of those original 3. Secondly, the Eldrazi are sexless and genderless as we understand those concepts. Referring to them using gendered pronouns is a holdover from when they were incorrectly worshipped as gods on Zendikar and had new identities projected onto them. Thirdly, for most of the Battle of Zendikar, the Eldrazi Titans were not physically on the plane. As Ugin explains it, they are comparable to a man placing his hand in the lake. To the fish in the lake, the hand is all that they comprehend of the man. It was only near the end of the block that Ulamog and Kozilek were possibly pulled wholly into physical space. 2010, Blind, the Blind Eternities. Going off from the Eldrazi, let's talk about the plane of existence that they inhabit, the Blind Eternities. Much like the Eldrazi, the Blind Eternities are a pretty out there concept, so they're prone to misunderstanding. Fans sometimes request a set within the Blind Eternities. However, the Eternities aren't a visitable location in that way. Fans tend to picture it as something like the wood between the worlds from the Chronicles of Narnia, as a physical realm that links to many different dimensions. In actuality, the Eternities do not exist as physical locations comprehensible to us. I can't find the actual post, since Tumblr's search function is atrocious, but the way that Mark Rosewater puts it, the Blind Eternities aren't a hallway that leads to different rooms, they're the walls between the rooms. We can't visit them, and even if we somehow did, there isn't a lot for us to see. 2011, New Phyrexia. 2018 set Rivals of Ixalan centered on 4 factions battling to reach the mythical lost city of Warzaka. The ultimate ending of the story was determined by an internet poll where fans voted on which group would be victorious. While this all was happening, some players complained that the last time Wizards promised to do something like this, they never followed through. According to these players, in 2011, Wizards promised to let the fanbase decide who would win the Phyrexian invasion of Mirrodin, either New Phyrexia or Mirrodin Pure. The thing is, this alleged promise is completely fictional. Wizards never promised to do anything like it. They remained coy on how it would ultimately end, and teased the possibility of either side pulling through, but they never stated that this story decision was in the hands of the players. In fact, New Phyrexia was always planned as the third set of the block, and it's easy to understand why. Firstly, the 2011 and 2018 situations are greatly different. Whoever won the IXAL-AND poll would not impact the actual set. The only thing that would change is which pre-written short story would be published as canon. In contrast, in 2011, choosing between New Phyrexia or Mirrodin Pure that late in the game would mean an immense amount of art, flavor text, story, editing, marketing, etc. would go to complete waste. Additionally, the block's culmination is clear from each set's card list. Scars of Mirrodin was about 90% Mirrodin, 10% New Phyrexia. Mirrodin was about 50-50 between the two sides. It only makes sense that New Phyrexia would be an inverse of Scars ratio. 2011, SHEOLDRED Manwarking. Staying on New Phyrexia, we have one more short story misconception. SHEOLDRED's death is completely unconfirmed. Elish Norn defeated her, but her ultimate situation is as of yet unknown. 2011, flip cards are the same thing as dual-faced cards. 2011's Innistrad block introduced double-faced cards. These served as a replacement to the interesting but ultimately unpopular flip cards of Kamigawa. Double-faced cards were a big success, becoming so popular that fans often ask Wizards to reprint the flip cards as double-faced cards, but otherwise are out of them. Unfortunately, this isn't as easily doable as some would hope due to subtle differences between the two mechanics. As is probably clear to everyone, I'm way more Vorthos than Amel, so my understanding of minute mechanical differences is minor, but we'll just have to take the designer's word on this one. 2012, Duel Decadence. The now defunct Duel Deck series was made up of packs of 2 decks designed to oppose each other. The series alternated between opposing themes and opposing planeswalkers. Because the first 4 planeswalker-themed duel decks featured planeswalkers who canonically battled, many assumed that is the case for every planeswalker duel deck. However, starting with 2012's Venser vs. Koth, this was more often than not the case. That deck's description pitches the conflict as an ideological debate for the direction of Mirrodin's resistance, but it's a stretch given that those two were on the same side. Next, we have Sorin vs. Tibalt, which was also soared as an ideological debate, but that's an even weaker claim because we don't even know if those two definitively met. Finally, we have Elspeth vs. Kiora, with a description that doesn't even try to sell the deck as based on an in-story battle, which makes sense because no battle between the two ever occurred. 2017, AMONKHET PRE-BOLAS. As many people understand it, AMONKHET was just a regular old plane until Bolas came around and ruined things for everyone, as he is wont to do. In fact, AMONKHET was already in dire straits way before Bolas arrived, with civilization having been reduced to the single city of Noctamun. Additionally, the Curse of Wandering, which caused everything that died on the plane to come back as a violent zombie, predated Bolas' arrival. Rather than Bolas bringing AMONKHET to ruin, it is possible that he chose the plane because it was already on the brink of ruin and would therefore make an easier target. 2018, Rivals of IXAL-AND and Another Thing. The ending of Rivals of IXAL-AND continues to be the gift that keeps on giving. You see, the version that we see on the cards and the version that many people believe never actually happened. Part of the story involves Vraska deciding to betray Bolas and allowing Jace to give her false memories in order to trick him. Some of these made-up events are depicted on actual cards, with no clear indication that they didn't really happen in story. 2019-ish, Color Goodness, as in power level-wise. A recurring theme in this video is that Magic players often have poor memories. If something prominent happened a really long time ago, they often think that it is still in fact or that happened recently. Alternatively, they often think that something that happened recently has always been the case. For example, take White being underpowered. Despite what the internet would tell you, it's a recent phenomenon. A few years ago, White was considered overpowered and overrepresented in Standard, leading to an effort to depower the color. And while they did go too far in the opposite direction, player response has still been overblown. For all the complaints of White's weakness, there were 7 decks running White in the most recent Magic World Championship, only a single deck was running Black. And for all the noise about green being inherently overpowered, it was considered a weak color for a large chunk of Magic's existence. Within 60-card, non-singleton formats, blue is the only color with a claim to consistent overpoweredness, and then only in Eternal formats with access to broken blue cards from very early in Magic. Finally, White and Red's respective weaknesses in Commander specifically do not mean that the color pie as a whole is fundamentally flawed, as the color pie should not be tied to a single, irregular, comparatively newer format. 2020, all out of LUKKA. LUKKA? Whatever. For our final story misconception, we'll talk about a character introduced just this year. LUKKA. LUKKA? Anyway, now I know that some people may accuse me of being overly defensive of wizards in this video, but I'm only trying to prevent them from getting blamed for things that they aren't responsible for. But if they are responsible for something, I'm fully prepared to say that. And they are absolutely responsible for players misunderstanding LUKKA's deal because they completely dropped the ball on portraying him consistently. If you were to only go off of the cards, you would assume that LUKKA is the good-hearted protagonist of Ikoria, a guy who went against an entire corrupt society to right a wrong and had a whimsical bond with an animal. But according to the Ikoria story, LUKKA is actually the most corrupt of them all. He's ultimately the antagonist of the story. While some of that is due to the influence of the Ozolith, it is explicitly stated that it was not controlling him, and he seemed like a pretty unlikable person all on his own. For all of his cards showing his tender bond with the winged tiger, Book LUKKA only sees animals as tools. He never even gives the one he bonded with a name, and he's not particularly upset when they die. Also, not once does he summon an agent of treachery for backup. Complete flavor disconnect all around. Thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and maybe even learned something new. I know that I definitely did. I also know that there are a lot more magic myths out there to bust, and that there's also a good chance I got something wrong here, so please leave any corrections or suggestions in the comments, and if I get enough, I'd love to come back for a sequel video one day. Also, big thanks to everyone who submitted ideas. I could not have done this without you. Finally, if you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing to support future content, and have a great day. Throat Wolf is not real. Throat Wolf will not get you. Throat Wolf does not know where you live.